Donnie and Dolly. The team is supported by ableauctions.ca. Closing your business? We can help.
Okay, again, it is a Friday. All of our guests today, including Thomas Drance, standing by. Brought to you by the Waddling Dog Pub in Victoria. Come sit and stay at the Waddling Dog as we bring in from the Athletic, Thomas Drance, in the wake of a 4-2 Canuck victory over Colorado last night. I want to get this in just before we get to Thomas. Andrew in Walnut Grove, Delaney's OK Tire and Langley inbox. Games like last night prove it's not the coach. Players are able to play good games with structure and make a choice not to play that way too often. Andrew in Walnut Grove. Of course, a lot of criticism about Bruce and structure the past little while. Andrew saying not so much as we bring in Thomas. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, although I'd be careful about reading too much into the result of one game either way. Of course, yeah. I don't think it's Bruce Boudreau's issue. Like, Bruce Boudreau is one of the winningest coaches in the history of this sport in the regular season. I mean, to look at Bruce and say, well, that guy just doesn't know how to win, you've got literally 800 results that prove otherwise. But, last night for me anyway, Canucks played great. Loved to see that effort level rebound after a New York Islanders game that I thought was maddening, unacceptable. Truly, that was the sort of effort where, even someone dispassionate like me looks at it and thinks, what are we doing here? So I like to see that effort level rebound, but the Avs it didn't feel like they wanted to win until the last 10 minutes of the third period. And they were ridiculously undisciplined throughout the game, but particularly in that second period when the tide turned.
Yeah. What were you thinking when the Canucks, given what happened with the Islanders, what were you thinking when the Canucks were down 2-0, Thomas?
Well, I was thinking this is great. This is exactly what they need. This is perfect. And, of course, the Canucks, the commitment to the bit is impressive, Donnie. The commitment to the bit, sometimes I get so annoyed by how frustrating and hopeless this franchise can be that I forget to enjoy the fatalistic whimsy of it all, right? Like on a night that the North Van kid wins gold and that Dylan Guenther, who we barely even talk about, we barely even talk about him as the one that got away in the Oliver Ekman-Larsson trade because he's the third worst part of that deal from a Canucks perspective. Scores the overtime winner, a golden goal to sort of cement himself in hockey's history books. The Canucks then eliminate a 2-0 deficit against the defending champs to pull 6 points clear of the Arizona Coyotes in the bottom five. I mean, you can't script it. The race for 10th in the West is on, boys. It's on.
Let me ask you, Thomas. I want to get into Guenther with you because do you have evidence the Canucks would have taken Guenther at 9? Because let me tell you something. Okay. The 11 picks after Guenther, 9 were forwards, 2 were defensemen, 2 were goalies, none were defensemen. Do you have evidence that Guenther was the guy the Canucks were going to take at 9?
Do I have evidence that the Canucks would have not messed up that pick? No.
But the way you're phrasing it like you have evidence they were going to take Guenther at 9.
Okay. Rick, come on, chill out. Here's what I can tell you about the Guenther.
That's a question. I asked you a question.
Yeah, and I'm about to answer it. Just let me talk. Part of the reason that the Canucks did ultimately feel comfortable trading it was that they had a decent sense of how the board was unfolding ahead of them, right? I think once they had a sense that Kent Johnson wasn't going to be available, who was the apple of some people in scouting's eye, and Simone Edvinsson in particular. Yeah. Once those two players, once they had a good sense that neither would be available. Oh, also William Eklund, who went to the Sharks. Those were sort of the three guys. Once they had a good sense that those guys wouldn't be on the board, I think the consideration of dealing the pick really cemented for the organization. In addition to Alex Edler announcing to the club that he wouldn't return and would test free agency, opening up this sort of spot on the left side, and they saw Oliver Ekman-Larsson as sort of naturally filling that slot on their roster and on their books. So that's sort of what I know about the anatomy of the mistake. If they'd kept the pick, would they have messed it up and picked someone other than a guy who is a historic WHL scorer? for a power winger who was already effective in the NHL, who just dominated a tournament. Look, you never bet against the Canucks whiffing on the draft floor.
Thomas, I want to stay with draft picks with you. Lekkerimäki, he's getting the poor kid's getting hammered for a bad World Juniors. But is this a case of, okay, he's coming off a concussion. Then before that, he had mono. It's been a bad year for the kid overall. But is he a kid you're writing off, or are you saying it's just been a bad year for him?
Oh, I'm definitely not writing him off. And here, I'll go even further than that, Rick. I know you're hearing concerns out of Sweden and within the industry. I'm hearing concerns. The scouts that I talked to who were in Halifax were wildly unimpressed with what they saw. He's one of those players. He's sort of got one dimension to his game, right? When the shot's not going in, when he's not scoring, he can be too perimeter oriented. The skating hasn't developed. There's concern for sure. There's concern in the industry. You're hearing it. I'm hearing it. But not only would I say that I'm not writing him off, I'd still defend the pick. Honestly, I still think it was the right play. I mean, when you're the Vancouver Canucks and you've got a myriad of issues, you got to take the home run cut. You've got to swing for the fences. And Lekkerimäki was a player widely expected to go in the top 10. Canucks didn't think he'd be available to them when they were picking at 15th. They were overjoyed to get him. In terms of what he did in the SHL last season as a 17-year-old, his profile was through the roof. Now, there's always concern these days about shot first, shoot first prospects. I think we've seen, especially over the last 10 years, if you're a shooter, like a sniper at lower levels, it's really hard for that to translate. You think about guys like Kiefer Bellows. You think about guys like Owen Tippett, Eli Tolvanen, who just was claimed off waivers by the Seattle Kraken. I mean, go back to Jake Virtanen. What we've sort of seen, and what some scouts in the industry are talking a lot about, is that if you're not a player who produces in a variety of different ways at the amateur ranks or in lower levels, it's hard to be a good enough sniper to really sort of make that your bread and butter in the NHL. You kind of need to have a more well-rounded game. I think that's the most valid concern for Lekkerimäki. The way that his Draft Plus One season has played out, deeply concerning, although he played well in the bronze medal game, no question. But, if you ask Patrick Alvin, he'll tell you it's a marathon, not a sprint. And there's still a ton of talent. This is a high pedigree player who's dealt with mono, a concussion, a variety of injuries. He's disappointed roundly this season, but there's a ton of time for him to get this back on track. And he's got the sort of high-end skill set that you definitely don't want to write him off when he's still 18.
Are you okay? Because Murph mentioned that there might have been a health issue yesterday.
Yeah. Oh, 3 minutes before I'm supposed to go on TV, my nose just started gushing blood. I got it all over my suit. It was embarrassing. So, I honestly, it didn't stop for half an hour. So I went down and I was talking to Murph and I had the Kleenex on my nose. and I was just like, I'll do it. I'll fight through the pain. He's like, do what you're comfortable with. And then I sort of removed it. And I think I probably just looked like Hannibal Lecter. And he was just like, nah, you're fine. You're all good, bud.
Yeah. Well, that's good. We were worried about you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was good. And I saw some theories that I'd been banned after calling for the team to get detonated on the Sportsnet broadcast.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's not the case. Truly, just very bad luck. I was just a little too messy to be on television.
Yeah, or maybe Rutherford had his way with you, maybe just before the interview. After what you said the first intermission. Hey,
an absolute gentleman.
One of my sons suffers from the same sort of thing, just nosebleeds out of nowhere. So in a way, I related. Thomas, thanks for this. Have a great weekend.
Anytime, gentlemen. Bye.
You bet. Thomas Drance from The Athletic.